John Redmann Power of Attorney, the show that aims to empower you through knowledge of the law. I'm Attorney John Redmann. Today we're beginning our two-part discussion on gun control, this time focusing on Governor Bobby Jindal's proposal to disclose the mental health records of people who want to buy guns to a national criminal background check system.
And hello everyone, I'm Shauna Sanford. Well, currently Louisiana statute prohibits the mental health records from being reported to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, also known as the NICS. Governor Jindal wants to change that.
Joining us to talk about this is Republican State Senator and practicing attorney Martiny of Metairie and constitutional law professor Maurice Franks.
We will get to our guests in just a few moments, but first, John, let's just talk a little bit about this proposal that the governor has laid out. Some people feel like perhaps he's gone just a little bit too far. I mean, we're talking about people's right to privacy.
Right, and mental health records are about as much in your business and as much in your private concerns as anything else. Mm-hmm. When they take the step to get care, mental health care, they are told you're in a safe place. And you are expected, in order to get help, to share your deepest concerns, fears, worries about anything. Critics are concerned that pitting that against your right to own a weapon for protection, for hunting, it's a constitutional right, is a recipe for trouble.
Right.
And looking forward to that discussion today.
That's right, because the flip side of that argument is, of course, given everything that we've seen happen here in the last month, the shootings in Connecticut, people are very concerned about how to keep guns out of the hands of people who are dangerous. And so you have to think that it is a fair discussion to have.
Right. At least we're having the discussion. That's a step forward. I would like to see what these two guests have to say about it. Constitutional rights are extremely important, but safety in our community is another very important concern.
That's
so I look forward to this discussion.
That's right, and we're going to get to our discussion in just a few moments. We have with us constitutional law professor Maurice Franks and also State Senator Martiny. They're going to join us in just a few moments, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Everyone, and welcome back to Power of Attorney. Should some privacy rights be given up when it comes to preventing more gun violence, like what happened in Connecticut last month? We are having a discussion today on gun control, and we're focusing on the mental health aspect of the debate and what could become a very controversial proposal by Governor Bobby Jindal.
Our guests are State Senator Martiny and constitutional law professor Maurice Franks.
And it's great to have both of you here to talk about this. It's a hot topic. Everybody is talking about it, whether here at the state level or at the national level. But first, I want to get your opinions. And Professor Franks, let's start with you on where this whole debate is going when it comes to gun control. And you look at what happened in Connecticut and the focus on the mental health part of this debate.
I think those who are opposed to private ownership of guns want to use this as the first step on a slippery slope. Let us not forget that the Second Amendment isn't the 20th Amendment. Our founding fathers thought it so important they put it in the number 2 position after freedom of religion and freedom of speech. And they did so for a reason. They know that a government cannot turn tyrannical if the citizens are armed. And in that regard, that's why we have, the U.S. Supreme Court has held now in the McDonald case and the Heller case, that the Second Amendment is not just for a militia or army, it's a private right. Let us not forget that one of the first things Hitler did was outlaw guns, one step at a time. You can't take them all away at once because people will rebel. So you outlaw this type of gun, then that type of gun, then this type of situation, then that type of situation until nothing's left. Mussolini did the same thing. Mao Zedong did the same thing. Joseph Stalin did the same thing. We don't want that to become what happens here in America.
Well, I don't think we're talking about taking away guns or preventing people from owning guns. Do you see it that way, Senator Martiny?
Well, I don't know. The problem that you have is, and I would agree with the professor in that, I think that the anti-gun people are seizing the moment. I mean, what a tragedy it was in Sandy Hook. But then the question that becomes, it's easy to talk about, it's easy to say we're going to create this national database and nobody wants to see a mentally deficient person harm somebody with a rifle or a handgun. but to me, the devil's in the details. I mean, what are we talking about? The stuff I'm reading is a lot of very general terms, which I think everybody can agree in principle that you may want to do. But I don't know. Are we talking about taking guns away from people? It's easy to say this person is mentally deficient. He's been so declared by a court. Don't give him a gun.
And I would agree with that.
What if he's got a gun already? Okay, is there going to be overreach there to go back and say we're going to take that gun away from him? I don't think so. I would hope that's that. I mean, I think there are safeguards that can be implemented to protect that person from using that gun, but actually going and taking it away, I think, is a problem.
And just to follow up, and very often, every time you see this discussed on any television show or in any public forum, it seems that there are people who are obviously and understandably very passionate about it, Second Amendment rights, and I believe in the right to bear arms myself, but there are some people who have such a strong reaction that just to bring up the idea of gun control, it almost brings up a knee-jerk reaction that just the fact that you want to bring up gun control means you're one of those people like you're gonna set up something that Mussolini and Hitler did. And I'm not suggesting, Professor, in any way you're suggesting anything like that. Then there are people on the other end who believe that, gee, we have so many people who die in this country compared to other countries that have gun controls that are a lot stricter than ours, who are kind of the other extreme. And it seems like it's a debate of extremes so often. This is an opportunity for us today to talk about, is there room for anything closer to the middle?
Oh, yes.
And the mental health debate is a hot button topic too, because there are mental health advocates who say, hold on, you don't get to pry into these people's personal mental health issues. It kind of made it more complicated. But why don't you respond to that?
I have no problem with sharing with the federal database those who have been adjudicated incompetent or who have been placed under a curatorship or guardianship because they cannot manage their affairs, or who have been found not guilty by reason of insanity for any crime. I have no problem with that, because they got a hearing before a judge, not a hearing before some psychiatrist whose prejudices on guns we don't know, not a, we can't let an individual unilaterally determine that. I'm sure there are those who would like all doctors to say, do you own guns? And they would know that some doctors are so conservative that on this issue that they would then call the feds and say, so-and-so told me he owns guns and I can't guarantee that he won't commit a crime, and bingo, that person is blacklisted.
Right. And so the concern there is it gives a great deal of power into the hands of mental health professionals, maybe not just doctors, but maybe psychotherapists, maybe other people who, for whatever reason, might have a personal agenda about guns. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and what about the person who went to a psychiatrist because they have an eating disorder or they're suffering grief because a loved one died? Are they going to be classified as mental ill and barred from defending themselves if someone breaks into their home?
Senator Martiny, I want you to jump in here because, as you said, the devil is in the details. And right now we don't really know what the details are of the governor's proposal, but he is proposing that mental health records be disclosed to this national database.
I would agree wholeheartedly with Professor Franks about the fact that someone has been adjudicated mentally incompetent. I don't want to say I'd go further because I think he might agree with this, but I think that incompetence would also have to be a second finding that that person was a danger to himself or to others, and that he had access to firearms. The problem is, and another thing that I worry about, and I was watching the news the other day, and I see that the parents of some of these people from Aurora, Colorado, are now going back against the psychiatrist who examined it, and they're saying you should have had him committed, you should have done that. That being said, my concern is twofold. Number one, are people going to be less inclined to be candid with their psychiatrist if they know that they can't protect that information? I mean, you know, someone may be very distraught over a breakup of a personal relationship, and he may be a hunter. Now, the fact that a psychiatrist may then take that quantum leap and say, well, if he's a hunter, he must have guns, and if he's that distraught, he may use them. I better report it so I don't get sued. So I think it's a two-edged sword, because maybe the patient's not going to be as candid because he's afraid he may lose his gun rights, and he may be somebody who who would never act out over the guns, but he's not even going to mention it, and or a doctor who's going to say, I don't want to be subjected to the to being sued, so I'm gonna err on the side of, hey, I think he might be incompetent, and let them sort it out.
So it's kind of a fear of a backlash from if this law or a law that is proposed gets passed, and there's the fear that people won't go get mental health care because of a worry that it might lead through a back door to their gun rights being affected, and mental health professionals fearing lawsuits, reporting people maybe when they don't really need to report them.
Well, but you know, we always seem to be reacting to some big tragedy. You know, the shootings in Colorado, the Sandy Hook. You know, I say this, and maybe it's too simplistic. Bad people are going to find a way to do bad things. We can enact all the laws you want. None of the shootings that we're talking about would have in any way been impacted if any of this stuff is implemented, because somebody's going to be out there to sell you an AK-47, even if it's not legal. And if you're willing to go into a building and shoot and kill 30 or 40 people and yourself, I don't think you really care whether you violated the gun control laws. You're just going to go do it. And so, you know, to that extent, we have to be real careful when we're doing this, that we don't start trampling on the rights of well-intentioned citizens who have a right to have these guns.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the constitutional amendment that was passed by the voters, and I know that you did support that constitutional amendment, and Professor Franks, you testified in favor of that constitutional amendment. I have had a chance to talk to some lawmakers who have said, because that is now the law of the land here, it really is going to be very difficult for the legislature to do anything in terms of gun control and legislation.
It's the law of this land. Anyway.
Yes, of this land, right, of this land.
There are things that can be done. Let's start out with the proposition that Australia outlawed all firearms a few years ago, and the murder rate in the Australian state of Victoria tripled. All of these things, it seems, happen in places that have gun-free zones sign on them. That includes the shooting in the theater in Colorado, where the assailant went out of his way to go to a theater that had a sign saying no firearms allowed, which of course is binding on people, because it tells the assailant he's got a soft target. He's not going to have anybody fight him back. The only thing that can stop a bad person with a gun is a good person with a gun.
And that is what the NRA said. And when we come back, we have to take a break right now, but when we come back, let's get into a little bit of the details of that amendment. We don't want to take it for granted that our viewers know exactly what is spelled out, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Plus, we are going to include your questions for our guests, so stay tuned. We're having a great discussion with Professor Maurice Franks and Senator Danny Martiny. We'll be right back.